Bitcoin was so early that there could be something that could replace it.
There wasn't really a lot of options. A lot of people just had to lose money.
To those who don't know what it is, you're saying it's essentially just really a replacement for the dollar?
Yes, we have some issues with fiat currencies. And so Bitcoin is basically offering an alternative to that, where you can actually have more control over your money. It's peer-to-peer, meaning that we don't have to go through a bank.
Okay guys, in this video, we are in for a very special treat. We're gonna dig in deeper for Bitcoin. And we have a crypto educator with us from Washington. We have Leah Thompson in the podcast joining us to share her insights. And I'm sure after this, you will think about Bitcoin in a different light. So Leah, how's everything? I can see the smile because I think you're doing well with your coins right now.
That's true. Thank you so much for having me as a guest here on the show. I know we've been chatting a little bit back and forth on Twitter, so it's nice to get to actually meet and hang out. So
let's start with your backstory, because Bitcoin has been around for 10 years, more than 10 years, over a decade. But in my opinion, it's still very, very new. We are still at the point where we don't know how far this will go. So how did you get into Bitcoin? What caused you to actually start deploying capital into it? Because when I first heard about it, 2013, I really thought it was a scam. How could computer algorithms and programs, and how can they make money from scratch, and how can it have value? Plus everything that you've been hearing that it's been used for sales in the black market, etc.
Yeah, so I first got into crypto in kind of early mid 2017. So I got to kind of experience the whole last bull run and all the excitement of that. But what's interesting is there's a lot of statistics that show people usually get into Bitcoin first and then they start exploring different altcoins. But I was actually the opposite. I originally started, getting into some of these altcoins, especially for those that were kind of around the crypto sphere back in 2017. There was a big ICO boom. There was all of these coins were just popping off crazy amounts. So I got excited about that, and I decided to jump in and start, trying to, I think what a lot of people try to do is catch the, next low cap gem that's gonna, send them to the moon. And, yeah, that strategy didn't work super great for me when everything crashed in 2018. And so I really shifted my mindset at that point to be like, okay, instead of trying to catch the next whatever, low cap gem, why don't I just really take a step back and look at which coins I think have more fundamental value, that I think have maybe a lot of development. There's a big community around it. What are the reasons that I think this coin is going to perform in the long run? And for me, that was in large part Bitcoin, also Ethereum and a few others. But I really shifted my strategy to dollar cost average and decide to just, okay, I'm going to every month, whatever I can, just invest that kind of excess income and put that into these coins, fewer coins that I believed in more, basically.
A lot of people don't admit when they lose money, and you started everything off with that. How big of a loss did you get when you started? Then what was your thought process when you were experiencing that? Because it could either go two ways. Other people would get burned and quit entirely. Other people would think that, oh, it's okay, I'll just hold on to this. What was happening at that time?
It's really interesting you mentioned that, because I had friends that did the exact same thing you just said. They got burned and they're like, this was terrible, I'm out. But I think for me is getting to experience that bull run and see that price action was, I don't want to say like a little bit addicting, but it was more like, you know what, there's a lot of potential here. And when I really started studying Bitcoin and looking at mining and the supply and how it's deflationary and the halving, and looking at the previous bull and bear cycles and being like, you know what, I think that we're going to have another bull run again in about 3 to 4 years, which is where we, are currently. I was like, this could be a huge opportunity that could really change my life if I'm dedicated with just putting away what I can, over the next 3 to 4 years until we kind of hit this point. And so that could have been a bad decision. I could have spent the last 3 or 4 years working towards something that didn't happen, but I'm excited, to see that it has been working out okay. I didn't put like a ton of money into it because I'd only been investing in some of these coins for like maybe 6 months, so it wasn't massive. But like, I'll give you an example. There was one, and again, this isn't like a ton of money, but I had put $2,500 into it, and today it's worth like $50. So it's like, so seeing those dramatic shifts where these coins that maybe I'd like throw in a few grand in here and there go down to literally like under $100 was very shocking. So yeah, that's when I decided to pivot.
You took the loss already, you didn't hold on to it anymore, and then you shifted it to, I assume, Bitcoin and Ethereum as well.
Most of my own personal portfolios is Bitcoin and Ethereum.
I remembered something when you were talking about this, because I had another broker which I didn't use as much, and it had Tron in it. So Tron was very promising in 2018, went
Right.
up a bit, then dropped. Then I looked at it yesterday. It was up. So I sold everything and transferred it to the Bitcoin. So that was a case of me forgetting about it and then just going back to see that it was actually doing better as well.
It's exciting. Right.
Going back to your journey, you were putting in money. It wasn't a big loss portfolio wise, but prior to this also, were you invested in other assets? Were you doing stocks or real estate? That's why the jump for you was easier, or you went from 0 to 100, no investments, direct crypto? Because for me it was kind of okay for me, because I don't know if you know, I'm really into stocks more. So
Yep.
profits from the market, that's what I'm investing in Bitcoin. And the volatility in the market, it's something that I've seen already through the years. How did it go for you?
Before getting into crypto, I was a very, very basic investor in the sense that I had like a Roth and a 401k, and I was, so I was saving a certain portion of my income every month, but I wasn't really, getting into the market per se. I was more like, okay, here's this, like, I'm just going to pick a Vanguard stock for my, 401k or whatever it is, right? Like just very, very basic retail level. And so it was quite an education curve. And I do have to say, like, credit some of the people around me. I have some friends in my life that are investors that were really, it was helpful to kind of get to ask them questions and get to learn from them a little bit, because it can be kind of overwhelming when you're on your own trying to figure some of the stuff out, trying to watch, YouTube channels like yours, right? And like learn from people that are doing this. And so it was nice to have people around me that I could actually kind of bounce questions back and forth and learn from as well. So.
Okay, so it was really 0 to 100. So what was the experience getting the volatility? Because I remember it, if you said 2017, that was a time that Bitcoin was below 10,000. Then suddenly December 2017, it was zooming to somewhere around 20,000 already. Then to see it crash in a span of a few days. Was that scary?
No, actually not really. It's really interesting because I think that once I really wrapped my brain around Bitcoin and the value proposition and where I thought this could potentially go long term, I haven't once in this last bear market been like, gosh, did I make a mistake? And I think my approach to it has been more like, you know what, if I did, that's fine. I can start over. Like, I think having confidence in yourself that, like, you know what, I'm really going to go deep on this because I have conviction about it, but also being kind of mentally prepared that, like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's only ever going to go to 10K. And that's fine. And, I can shift and maybe get more into stocks or, do something different. But I really, truly this whole time have been just very excited for Bitcoin and like really have believed in the fundamental value of it. And so I've gone deep on it, but I've also been kind of mentally prepared that it's okay if it doesn't work out. It was kind of my mindset. So.
Got it. Now I'm curious about this because you sound so convinced about it. Because just to give you context also, when I started investing in Bitcoin, my whole mentality is, if this goes to zero, I'm okay. If it goes to become the currency of the future, at least I have exposure. So I was just investing just for the context of I want to have exposure in it, but I wasn't fully convinced in terms of weighting my portfolio. I think the difference between 2021 and 2017 is people somehow now we got used to Bitcoin already. But what did you see at that time that gave you the conviction to invest in Bitcoin?
Looking at a more macro level at our monetary policies, like of the world, of fiat currencies, which is funny at that point, I was like, I can't believe how much money we've printed, which is hilarious now considering how much more we have printed. But just in general, like looking at how like the US dollar used to be backed by gold. Now it's not backed by anything. It's a depreciating, or it's an inflationary asset. And just really looking at kind of who are the custodians of money of the world and how are they handling it, and not really agreeing with how that's all being handled. And so looking at Bitcoin as a potential alternative where it's decentralized in the sense that it can't be manipulated. It's got a, fixed supply, so it's deflationary. That's what I would want in, a store of value or a monetary policy. Like these are the things that I think will actually are important and would have add value to a society versus what we have now. And so I think more looking at it from a societal level and from a monetary policy, that was kind of my biggest driver.
I'm sure there will be people who are watching this that are thinking about these questions. The US dollar, it's been printed massively, but it's backed up by the government. Who's backing up Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Where does the value come from? How can I rely on just algorithms and computer programs and the notion that the only reason why it has value is because people are willing to buy it higher?
You make a good point. When I said like the dollar's not backed by anything, you're right. It's backed by people's faith in the dollar. It's backed by our government. It's backed by the United States having a certain dominating presence in the world, all of these things, right? So it is backed by certain things, just not things that you can really quantify, like
not
in
gold,
a very...
Not gold anymore. Yeah, agree.
Yeah, exactly. And so in terms of like, why does Bitcoin have value? What's backing it? I think it ultimately comes down to the most basic market principle of supply and demand, right? Which is why I was willing to kind of bet like, hey, I think that this is going to do well, but it's possible that it won't, because really it does require people deciding that they want to use it, that they want to hold it as a store of value. Obviously now we've seen big companies, like MicroStrategy and just recently Tesla adding it to their treasury and their balance sheet. And so those are the kinds of things that need to happen to continue accelerating Bitcoin forward. But if everyone decided, I don't really want to use this anymore, then yeah, the value and the price really would go down. And so I think it really is based on supply and demand. People want to use it. People want to hold it. And so the value is going up because I like to think of it as like the currency of the people. And so the fiat might be backed by the government, but Bitcoin is really backed by the people and all the people in the network that use it and hold it.
I was thinking that Bitcoin was so early that there could be something that could replace it. A couple of months ago, I was interviewing the CEO of eToro, and while we were talking, will something replace Bitcoin? And he said this, Bitcoin is like a brand already in and of itself, that it's so big already that it will be hard for any other cryptocurrency to replace it. We don't even say crypto. We say everyone says Bitcoin as a collective term for cryptocurrency already. And I think that's where Bitcoin is. And even if you go into the altcoin world, you can't buy altcoin without passing through Bitcoin. So it essentially has become the US dollar as well.
And a really interesting point on that is it used to be that you had to go through Bitcoin, but there are now more USD pairs. And so the attachment of Bitcoin to altcoins are starting to separate a little bit in terms of that dynamic. But it's true. Bitcoin may not be the fastest or the cheapest for transactions, or there's all these other altcoins that have kind of maybe addressed some potential issues that Bitcoin has. But it's true in terms of market dominance and in terms of people, actually knowing about it, feeling comfortable investing in it. Bitcoin is light years ahead of most other altcoins. Like you mentioned, Ether and Ethereum is probably the next closest one. But even within that, we're seeing, like I said, like more of these institutional buyers. We're seeing, some of these big companies, they're buying Bitcoin. They're not buying, at least at this point, any other altcoin. Like maybe eventually they'll start adding Ethereum into their treasury or other things. But Bitcoin, I think, truly has kind of started to separate itself from the pack a little bit in that sense as well.
What is the simplest explanation that you can give people on what Bitcoin is. For those up until now, 2021, they still can't understand what it is. How can you laymanize it and break it down to people that after hearing this, they'll call you the patron saint of Bitcoin because you explained it to them so well?
Okay, let's see how I do. So I mean, basically the way that, like, if a friend came to me and was like, what is Bitcoin? Like, the way that I would explain it is, yeah, I would probably start out by just kind of chatting about our current monetary system, because in my viewpoint, Bitcoin is really the solution to some of the issues that we're seeing. So first you have to kind of address the problem before you can talk about the solution. And so one thing that is actually very interesting, I think, that's changed this last year is the amount of people that are actually aware of our monetary issues and of quantitative easing, and, like, you know, maybe they just know the phrase like money printer go brr, but the fact that more and more people are aware that the US dollar is losing value, it's become something that's kind of not a pop culture reference, but it's a mainstream kind of idea that people have embraced, where I would say even 3 or 4 years ago, people are like, what are you talking about? You know, like that's not a conversation that was really top of mind. And so really looking at, hey, our monetary system is heading downhill. Like, you know, we had the big crash of 2008, and there wasn't really a lot of other assets that people could move into to help protect their wealth back then. I mean, there was obviously gold and silver and precious metals, but in terms of hard money, there wasn't really a lot of options. A lot of people just had to lose money in 2008. And now we have so many more options. You know, we had obviously last year a bit of a market crash. Who knows what's coming next, right? Like with all of the different things that have been happening, who knows, right? We could speculate on that, but all day. But what's great is that there's a lot more options. And that's why I think that we're seeing more institutional investors wanting to get exposure to Bitcoin. You know, we just saw with the last year with gold, it became difficult for people to even buy gold. It was really difficult for people to move into that, where Bitcoin was a much easier asset for them to be able to move some of their funds into. And so I think hedging against just the current market conditions, I think is a good reason that a lot of people are looking at Bitcoin. I'm realizing I'm rambling now. You asked me to give a quick explanation and I went off on a tangent, but basically I think that most people are starting to realize, yes, we have some issues with fiat currencies. And so Bitcoin is basically offering an alternative to that, where you can actually have more control over your money. It's peer-to-peer, meaning that we don't have to go through a bank. You know, like if I was going to send money to you for something, like instead of doing a big wire transfer internationally that has all of these fees, that takes all of this time, I can just send it directly to you and it'll be there in a few minutes probably. And so just really looking at the global nature of this as well, and the fact that, you know, more and more people are becoming aware of censorship issues, right? Like we've seen it in a variety of different areas, not just on social media, but even with companies like Robinhood just shutting down trading. Well, if we're just, you know, transacting peer to peer, I'm just sending you Bitcoin. No one can shut that down. We're the only two people involved. And so I think that people are becoming more aware of our monetary issues, two, the need for options that are more decentralized, that can't be controlled by governing bodies or by big companies.
To those who don't know what it is, you're saying it's essentially just really a replacement for the dollar?
You know, that's a really interesting thing to maybe talk about as well, because there's a whole conversation about whether it's a currency or a store of value, right? And so there's a lot of people that they just hold it kind of like you would hold gold. Like, you're not going to take gold to the store and try to buy your groceries with it. And then there's other people that are like, hey, let's use this as an actual currency, where, you know, Starbucks to accept it so they can pay for their coffee with crypto or whatever, right? And so I think that there's definitely value in both. And for people that are wanting to kind of opt out of our financial system a little bit more, it is nice to have it as a currency, in the sense that, you know, if I want to, let's say, I don't know, buy a plane ticket, and I am wanting to, you know, use Bitcoin, like, that's great if I can actually just do that directly, versus having to sell Bitcoin, put it into fiat, buy the plane ticket, right? And so I do think that there's value for people that are wanting to kind of go more to one side of, you know, of using it as a currency. But yeah, that is a really interesting kind of conversation I would say that's happening in the crypto space as well.
Got it. And